Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Eddie Jennings from EJSLLC.com. This video is going to be another in my RHCE practice session series where I am preparing for the Red Hat Certified Engineer exam. Before we dive in, I want to thank returning subscribers for watching another video, as well as invite anyone who's watching who has not subscribed to click that subscribe button and ring the bell when you do so you can be aware of when new content comes available. Also, if you enjoy the video, make sure you don't forget to click like as well as share with others that might find it useful as well. So this video is going to be the first about the objectives within the install and configure an Ansible Control Node section of the RHCE objectives. We'll be looking at install required packages. And I want to remind you that this isn't necessarily intended to be authoritative information, and it's also not intended to be a tutorial. However, what I'm trying to do is go through the objectives, talk about them, try to do some examples of them as a self-assessment to see if I'm prepared to handle tasks on the RHCE exam related to those objectives. And at the end of the video, I'll have a pretty good idea of if I'm ready, or otherwise I have actually 3 weeks to the day left to shore up some knowledge gaps before taking the exam. All that being said, I do intend to have the information as accurate as possible. And also, if you're preparing for the RHCE exam and you're watching some of my videos, perhaps some of the things I do troubleshooting wise would be helpful for you with your own studies if you run into some roadblocks and such. So getting into it, here we are with my Red Hat Enterprise Linux workstation. I'm going to SSH into my Ansible Control Node. Now this is a fresh install of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and this install was the minimal installer. The only extra thing that I had added to it was the guest agents, just in case I want to do some stuff with KVM. But otherwise, this is as minimal bare of an install of Red Hat Enterprise Linux as you're probably going to get. And I like doing this for my Red Hat exams. I did this for the RHCSA exam prep as well, because if there is something that you need to download and install, it kind of makes you do that. So that way, when you get to the exam, and let's say your exam environment has like just minimal packages for Red Hat Enterprise Linux, then it won't be a problem for you if there's something that you need to have to do the objectives. If you get to an exam environment and this is like the most robust install ever, everything you need is there, then awesome. But you won't be in a situation where you don't know how to get the items that you need. So the thing for installing Ansible, what you need to do is enable the repositories for it. Now there's a couple ways of seeing what repositories that you have enabled, and I'm going to do DNF repo list. It's going to complain that I'm not using sudo for that. You don't have to have sudo. This is a something with subscription management, which when I get a chance, I'll dive into a bit more. I'll probably do some videos and such about it. But DNF repo list will show you the repositories that you have. Now, by default on a Red Hat Enterprise Linux installation, you're going to have the base OS and app stream. And I can try to do DNF DNF install Ansible. If I can spell tonight. Oh wait, need to do sudo for that. And I don't believe it's going to find it. I'm fairly sure we have to enable one of the repos for Ansible. Yeah, that's what I thought. You can also use Yum as well. Yum is pretty sure just a symlink to DNF in RHEL 8. So we need to enable a repository. So on a RHEL system, there are a couple of ways of doing this. One way is using Subscription Manager. So for this, we would need to know the name of the repository for that. So I'm going to do sudo subscription manager and just repos. I'm going to grep I for Ansible. Now this command will take a little bit of time. I noticed that the subscription manager command tends to be a bit slow for that. I'm not sure on the exam how this is going to be because you're going to be working with Red Hat Enterprise Linux obviously on the exam, but what I don't know is whether or not your installation is going to have an active subscription to where you use Subscription Manager or not. So we're going to look at a couple of different ways of getting the repository enabled. Now there are several Ansible repos for this, and from what I can remember from the actual objective, it explicitly says that you're being tested on Ansible Engine 2.8. So if that's the version of Ansible that you want, then the repository that you're going to want is just the Ansible 8 x86 64 RPMs. I don't think you necessarily need the debug RPMs. And there's another flavor, I thought there was. I don't think you need the source RPMs either. When everything I've done with my practice has been with the just the RPMs thing. 2.9 is the most recent version of Ansible I think is available for Red Hat. You can also just do Ansible 2, which I think that's going to give you whatever current is. But for my own practice, I have been doing Ansible 2.8 because that's just what is explicitly put onto the objectives as this is the version of Ansible engine that we're using. Now, of course, I'll check that a couple more times as I get close to the exam. I don't think there's going to be huge differences between 2.8 and 2.9, but it is good to check up on that, especially if you happen to be watching this video well into the future and you're preparing for your RHCE exam. So I'm going to copy the name of that repository. Let me clear my screen. And so we're going to do sudo subscription manager repos, I think it's -- enable, and then the name of the repository. All right, and as I mentioned, it takes a few seconds or so, and then it tells you it's enabled for the system. You can confirm that either with DNF repo list, or if you wanted to use subscription manager for it, sudo subscription manager repos -- list enabled. Oh, need to spell repos correctly. And again, after a few minutes or so, it will tell you what repos are enabled, that enabled equals 1. Take note of this, that this is saying that this is available repositories in etc yum.repos.d redhat.repo, as that'll be important for the next couple of things that we look at. And then once this is here, sudo dnf install Ansible. And it should find it, and then we do -y. Notice that is installing Python as well, which obviously is something that's needed for Ansible. One thing to take note of is for any nodes that you're going to be managing, you do not have to have Ansible installed on those nodes, but rather you do need to have Python installed on those nodes. So I would say that would be a definite thing to check, when you get to your exam. And if you're in an environment, which I imagine that you're going to be in an environment where you're going to have a control node and you're going to have a couple of nodes that you are, that you would be managing through Ansible, hence, what the test is about. You would want to verify that your managed nodes have Python installed on it. And that's it. So at this point, I can do Ansible localhost setup, and we know that Ansible is functioning on this system. Now, it is possible to install Ansible from source. I'm not sure if you're going to have the internet access to reach out to the Git repository for Ansible, and frankly, I don't have the URL memorized for that. I might, between now and the exam, look over how to install it from source, which is basically cloning their Git repo. Well, there's a bit more to it than that. However, I'm fairly sure on the exam, probably what you're just going to be doing is, DNF install Ansible, assuming you even have to install Ansible. It might already be installed for us. There's no way to know. But I'm fairly certain that you would have access to the repositories for that. So now I'm going to revert the VM to its fresh install state via snapshot, and we're going to look at another way of enabling the repository. All right, so we're back, and I went ahead and SSH'd in, and again, if I were to do DNF repo list, what we're going to see are just those two default repositories, because I've reverted back to a complete fresh install. So another way to make Ansible available for you as far as having the right repo is we can use the DNF command. Now, one thing I am going to look up with DNF, because I just realized that there should be a way to list, pretty sure there should be a way to list all of the repositories that would be available to enable. Yeah, repo list all. Yep. All right, so we could go to the yum Etsy or Etsy yum repos.d and look up the repository name that way. But we could also do this: DNF repo list disabled grep-i Ansible. And frankly, this might be a little bit faster way because DNF tends to run faster than Subscription Manager does. But we'll get our repo list here, or our repository name rather. And we should, if I remember off the top of my head, DNF enable in the repo name. I believe that's what it is. No such command enable. Let's see. All right, man DNF, because I'm forgetting this off the top of my head. Typically when I've enabled repos, I've done it by altering the file, but I am fairly certain there that can be done via DNF. Yeah, okay, so it'll just be -- disable and then -- enable or set enabled. Okay, that's what I thought. All right, so sudo DNF enabled. Let's see, must be used with a config. Okay, so is it DNF? Well, clearly I'm not remembering this like I thought I did. So DNF config manager enable. Maybe that's what I want. Okay, no errors that time. So let's do sudo DNF repo list. Does that show our repositories? Looks like it does. So sudo DNF install Ansible. All right, so it found that. I'm not going to install it this time. One thing I am going to do real quick is reboot the VM because I'm curious. I know Subscription Manager and enabling that survives a reboot. I want to make, I'm sure it does. I just want to make 100% sure that the DNF config -manager -- enable actually makes that be a persistent change. All right, and we're back in. So let's do sudo DNF repo list. Again, you don't have to do sudo for this. I guess it's just a habit that I've got into. All right, and there's our repository. So let me revert the snapshot one more time, and we will look at a third way of enabling the repository. All right, so we're back in. Again, DNF repo list. We'll see that we only have the two. And so the third and final way to enable this is we can go into the vi etc. Actually, I need to do this with sudo privileges, I believe. So etc repos or yum.repos.d and then redhat.repo. Now on the exam, I don't know if this will be exactly how it is. I imagine it's probably going to be something similar to it, but we would need to find the Ansible repo that we want. So I'm going to do /Ansible. And we found Ansible 2. I'm pressing N to keep going through it. 2.9. There's another 2 source RPMs. This debug RPMs for 2.8. And there we go. So 2.8 and just the RPMs. And what we will do is change enabled to 1. Save and quit the file from VI. And let's do DNF repo list one more time. There it is. And DNF or sudo DNF install Ansible. And of course it found it. And then we'll reboot, make sure it persists, even though I'm certain that it will. All right, so we're back in. Sudo, or we don't need sudo for that, DNF repo list, and it should still be there. And there it is. So I hope you found this video useful. Not a lot of real challenging things, but just a couple different ways of enabling the Ansible repository for being able to install the required packages. And again, the required package is really Ansible itself and Python. And then when you install Ansible, it's going to grab Python via the dependencies. And then on the managed nodes themselves, they will need to have Python in it, or Python installed as well. I would suggest that you have the same version of Python between your managed nodes or your control node and your managed nodes. I haven't tried it with mismatched versions of Python. I imagine stuff might work, but I'm not 100% sure of that. And I would say if you have the option, try to have it to be the same. So I want to thank returning subscribers for watching another video, as well as invite everyone to subscribe if you haven't and ring the bell when you do subscribe. Feel free to leave comments. You can ask questions, give critique, give praise. It's all good, and I'll respond as I have both time and ability. And that might mean I don't get to everything, but I'll try to respond as much as I can. As always, thanks for taking the time to watch, and I'll see you the next time.